All right, we're good to go.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Sean McDermott, and joined here by Dustin Schroeder. And I am struggling to find out where the share my screen setting is in Meet. Where did it go? I see David very large. You want to help me out, Stephanie?
Down at the very bottom, there might be toward the right. If you're on your laptop, present now.
Oh, more people joining.
Yeah, it doesn't say shared screen, right? It says something like present screen. So I don't know if I can prove.
I got it. The toolbar disappeared. All right. Hi, everybody. You guys see that now?
Good morning. Yeah, I can see it.
Good morning.
All right, so we're going to do the coffee talk a little bit differently than we do a coffee talk at a campground. So rather than kind of sit around and chat about stuff and show stuff, although I have stuff to show if we want to go that direction. What I did with Dustin is we prepared some slides to kind of put down some background information and talk about some data points on different cell plans and things like that we won't have to spend a lot of time on here, but we can share the deck afterwards and people can look at it. But it'll also give a little bit of structure to an area that just has a lot of information going around. And the other key thing is today is April 15th, 2020. And the information is changing here super fast. And so the information will probably get out of date pretty quick. So don't assume everything here is correct later in the year, but it's probably not going to change enormously. We'll touch on one of the biggest changes that happened in the last couple of months with OTR switching from AT&T to T-Mobile. That was a big change for a lot of people, and it does impact one of the options that would be a go-to option for internet. But to start off, what I'll cover with Dustin, basically a quick background on internet in RVing and kind of the areas we'll focus on today. We'll talk a bunch about devices and equipment. By devices, we mean things like phones, routers, TV, mirroring software or hardware, and equipment being antennas, boosters, things like that. We'll talk about cell data plans, probably the number one topic for any conversation like this. And there are some good data plans out there, so it's not all bad news at the moment. We'll talk a little bit about the future because that gets really interesting about what might come later this year into next year, which might impact your purchase of any serious hardware. And then we'll kind of open it up and have a chat about different topics, but please do chime in as we're going along if there's a question on anything that we're talking about. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background. This isn't a shocker to anybody on the call or anybody watching. We are a little bit different than most other RVers. Typically, we're not necessarily trying to get away from it for the weekend, but we are living our lives. And so our use case for cell data is different. And even within our community, talking to each other, we can see what we need our cell data for is quite different. And so plenty of people need it for work, but even people that need it for work need it for different things. Some people need do video editing and need these huge downloads, huge uploads. Other people just need it for kind of email and light, video calls like this. I would say most people want to watch some kind of TV. Typically on the road, it's like Netflix or some online service. Many families, many kids, many parents also game. And so the type of connection that you want for gaming is important. And increasingly, and we're all doing it right now, video chat and Zoom calls like this use a bunch of data. So we are going through more data probably every year than the previous year, even if you've been on the road multiple years. But the key kind of point here is that there isn't going to be one answer for everybody. your particular kind of need is different, and everybody's budget is different. What they're willing to and can spend on this is really variable. So the goal today is to talk about what all the options are. Some of them will not be relevant for you. Certainly, I want to highlight a couple of the cheaper options. I use 2 of them, and I'll talk about those later, which 2 I use. There are some really good low-cost options out there for cell data. They don't work for a lot of use cases, though, so we'll talk about those too. To state the obvious, I think everybody wants one of the preferred networks, being Verizon. I'm getting a call somewhere in the room here on a different device. Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. But also, these days I have T-Mobile and Sprint linked here because the T-Mobile and Sprint have merged. Their networks are roaming. And so a Sprint or a T-Mobile option is actually much better than it used to be. We'll touch on that. And then there's US Cellular, which probably isn't going to be a primary network for anybody, but is one that's useful to roam to sometimes when you're, out in the wild. There is, I think everybody knows, there's a pretty big difference between a prepaid contract where you're paying by the month and a kind of a postpaid contract or kind of a contract where you're often committed for a year or 2 on a particular deal. There are pros and cons of these. We won't spend time on it. Usually the big pro of prepaid is that you can stop it at any point. And so if you're not sure about something or you need something just for a few months, prepaid often works really, really well. We'll touch on examples later, like Visible for the Verizon network, that allow you to just pay by the month and then drop it. And then the other big topic that we could spend a lot of time on, but we're not going to, is, unless there's questions, is Wi-Fi versus cell at campground. I think probably many of you would agree that we're not going to, we typically do not find great Wi-Fi at this thing is still, can you guys hear the noise in the background?
Very little.
Okay, that's fine. I think one of my kids.
Doing that. We'll have different breakdowns too between the data on their device alone and what their hotspot is. Sometimes, even though it's the same device, there might be different caps for the 2.
Hey, I'm back. It was somebody was ringing my son's phone to look for it, so we've located the phone. So the other thing we'll talk about a little bit more, and on the data, Dustin just chimed in there on hotspot devices. Many of the cell phone plans that are available do not officially support running the SIM and running the plan on full, just because it won't have all of the modern bands that different carriers use. Basically, there are different frequencies that different carriers use that will allow you to connect to their network at different frequency levels. And if you don't have all of the frequencies available on your device, you might be missing out on a frequency that would deliver. Middle here, the Netgear Nighthawk doesn't have band 71. You're not going to be on T-Mobile if you have this device or an AT&T device. And that's really hurting a bunch of OTR people right now that got AT&T devices from OTR. And now when they switch over to T-Mobile, they have an AT&T router on a T-Mobile network, which is not ideal. Happy to get into any more details about stuff here. One thing actually I'll mention, I have a picture of a Google Pixel 4 phone on the top here, which was my phone of choice when I upgraded after a few years late last year. There are phones right now like this one, not very many, that actually can do dual SIM. And so what I would actually say that that's a valuable feature to note when you're buying a phone. There are also routers, we'll touch on them in a minute, that are much more expensive, where you can put dual SIM and have 2 data connections and spread your traffic across 2 different data connections. That's pretty advanced, and very few people actually do that. The other thing I wanted to mention.
Can I add one thing in there?
Go ahead, Dustin.
On when he's talking about like the Pixel 4, one thing to note is sometimes the US carriers like Verizon, AT&T, they may make you pay off the phone. You might not be able to owe money on it in order to unlock it and use multiple carriers. So if you finance the phone through the carrier, sometimes they won't let you unlock it to do the dual SIMs, depending on the model of the phone. So that's something that you might want to know too, is you might have to pay off the phone in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, good point. If you're buying the phone at discount through a carrier, it only makes sense that they would want you under some contract because that's how they're offering you the discount. If you buy directly from Apple, directly from Google, on phones like this, you're typically paying full price. I got it on a kind of Cyber Monday deal and was able to get it at half price, but you typically are paying to buy the phone outright and you don't have that issue. And I generally like to buy phones that way so that if something comes up and I need to change plan, you have internet connectivity. If you have a router, which I do in my RV, I actually connect this directly to the router, and so I can watch those things on the TV through the router. If you don't have a router and use your phone, you can just pop up anything on your phone: YouTube, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Netflix, all of those, and many of the other TV apps, news apps, HBO app. They all allow you to cast to a TV through these devices. And so if you use the TV in your rig, some people don't, this is a good little device. And again, at $30 at the low end, for anybody who has a fancy 4K TV, which would definitely be an upgrade. And these plug into some routers, but not others. So it's something to be aware. If you're buying a router and you're just, again, deciding between two routers and one has a MIMO antenna, has MIMO antenna ports and the other doesn't, I'd recommend getting the one with the MIMO antenna ports. So on the left here, I own both of these routers. On the left is the AT&T Netgear Nighthawk router. I own one that's a little bit like that. I own the M1. And on the right-hand side is the Inseego, I think this is an 8800 from Verizon. They also do a Sprint one. And it also has two little ports. And so you connect these two connectors in. These are also have batteries in them, and you can stick them in any window in your RV. So you can kind of point in any four directions. And typically when we get to a new the performance of the router. And so if you have a router that has these two little gold circular ports at the end of it, it's for a MIMO antenna, and definitely buy the $40 upgrade. We also we bought a second one, an antenna that stays in our truck. You're probably going to need to invest a bit up front, or you're going to have some miserable days driving around looking for internet or working from your truck, which I did many times before I bought a cell booster. And so like on the left here, there's you can buy really fancy routers anywhere from $200 to $500 just for a router that will take one or two SIM cards and do a really good job with that. This is a MoFi. This is a PepWave on the bottom left. You'll see these mentioned in kind of internet forums a lot. You know, the WeBoost boosters. Somebody asked actually on Facebook whether whether WeBoost is the only kind of booster game in town, and they're not. They are, probably undisputed as the best boosters out there, but they're expensive. And so I think if you're borderline and you just need it, there probably are boosters around $200 that will be close to it. I honestly don't know what they are. Dustin, do you know anything about non-WeBoost boosters?
I don't. I know that they exist, and I know that they will work. And another thing to know about a cell booster, depending on how you travel and you camp, like me, I use mine maybe 8 times a year. Otherwise, most of the time I have cellular service, but the 8 times a year that I do need it, I definitely do need it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I know that some people do a permanent mount on, maybe even if I look at the last year, I even used I took out my booster maybe 4 or 5 times. But again, those 4 or 5 times, like Pio Pico in San Diego, we were there about the same time Dustin was. And until we put up the booster, our AT&T signal was bad and there was no Verizon. And with the booster, the AT&T was actually pretty good. And so it made all the difference between us staying or possibly even leaving early. And so I actually use this thing on the top right. This Techno RV actually is is one of the big kind of websites, businesses, a small business out there. And I let the wire come in through my slide, connected to this device, the WeBoost powered booster setup, and then sit my router generally right on top of the additional kind of in-house unit that sends out that's kind of the new cell, the extender, and then it will often boost 2 bars level of signal. And then you get all of the throughput. So getting setups like this are really awesome. I probably wouldn't. I know actually. Some folks find directional antennas. This is tiny, but of a directional antenna here that you can put on. Typically, you want it on an adjustable pole because you're going to orient it and change it until you get a strong signal. Eric Benson is an example of somebody that is a directional antenna on a flagpole that you can put up really high. They sell kits that do that. I think this is actually the kit here, Connect RV. Does that say 6595? And so that actually is quite useful in terms of being able to point directly at a tower. I use an Omni because the Omni is pretty good and it doesn't need any adjustment. It picks up cell in any direction. But if you were going to be stuck somewhere for a while, I shouldn't say stuck, but if you're choosing to stay somewhere for a while, then and you want to optimize, I think a directional at that point makes a lot of sense. You want to put a little bit more effort into getting great signal. We're typically only stopping for a week or two, so I don't want to put a lot of effort into getting really good signal.
And one more thing on that with the
directional that I bought as well, a cheap, somewhat cheap Wilson antenna that looks like this one here. I've actually never used it because I've always been able to get the traffic. I've always been able to get good cell signal from the Omni directional. Anything else you wanted to add, Dustin, on equipment?
One more thing. Before adding any of this, like advanced equipment, Sean hit on this a little bit, but honestly, one of the better things to have is multiple carriers. So if you have T-Mobile and AT&T or Verizon and AT&T, I know it's a little bit bigger expense because then you have multiple cell phone bills, but I couldn't tell you how many times that's saved our butt by having both Verizon and AT&T are the 2 carriers. Usually one of the tools that I recommend to people before anything else.
All right, let's speed up a little bit. We're a place like Thousand Trails Orlando for many, many months. You definitely would not want to stick with Verizon and AT&T for the whole period. It would drive you crazy. And so you probably want to look for, at minimum, a short-term T-Mobile or Sprint option that you could pay by the month. And then just to get through that period, and then you don't necessarily need it anymore once you go somewhere else. And so these are all of the variables and why, again, there isn't one answer fits everybody here for which network. So Dustin, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next little bit, and you can talk in particular about Verizon and AT&T.
So what you see on the screen here is the Verizon plans, and these are all the off-the-shelf plans. So these are the plans that you can go to Verizon and get today. And I know on the screen that some of it's fair print, but they essentially have 5 different plans with Verizon. And the one on the far left tends to be the preferred by a lot of our viewers because it comes with 30 gigabytes of hotspot. And how Sean was saying about the different, like if you're streaming for TV, they have the amount of video. So with that Get More Unlimited, the far left column, it will show the 720p, where if you go over to the Do More one plan over, that one's 480, and that one has 15 gigabytes of hotspot. So when you're looking at plans, those are some of the things that are important to our viewers. How much hotspot data can they get? And that's all per line. One advantage Verizon has over AT&T on their plans, which we'll talk about the AT&T ones next. But with Verizon, you can pick and choose between here. So you could have but they won't do that until after your 50 gigabytes on that Do More plan, or you'll see the start. They can pretty much always limit you. You don't have any dedicated premium data is what they call it. The Playmore has 25 gigabytes, 50, and then 75. Your hotspot is separate data from that. And the hotspot is unlimited on the Play, the Do, and the Get More. But after the amount that's stated on there, so the 50 gigabytes, or the 15, it will slow down. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call here, so it might have. Can you guys hear me still?
Yep.
Okay, Sean, if you want to go to AT&T, I'll kind of hit that one. So this one I couldn't find as pretty of a graphic. So it's essentially just an Excel spreadsheet that AT&T had on their website. But really, the three colors, the green, the blue, and the yellow, those are the three plans that they currently have. I know it says 2019, but these are still current plans. With AT&T, it's the same thing. You can get 1 to 10 lines, and you get a price break on per line. So if you look at the per line price, so on the Elite, it's 85, 75, 60, 50. So the per line cost will go down, but with AT&T, you all have to be on the same. So if you get 5 lines, all 5 have to be on Elite or Extra, or whichever plan that you choose. They all have to be the exact same plan. And then if you go to the bottom part of this Excel spreadsheet, you get 100 gigabytes of premium data, or on the Extra, you get 50 gigabytes. And again, the starter, they can slow you down on congestion at any time that they want. And then hotspot, again, those are two of the things that you really want to look at, is how much data you get on the phone itself, and then how much you can get on hotspot before they throttle you down. So on the Elite, it's 30 gigabytes, just like on the Verizon's Get More plan, and then 15 gigabytes, which is just like the Do More plan. And then it does show you your high definition. So if you are using it for watching TV, you get high definition, the Stream Saver. So it's essentially 720, and then 480 on the smaller ones, which is standard definition. If you're watching it on an iPad, that's not a big deal. If you're watching on a 32-inch screen, you might notice a difference. Both, it says first responder discount. Actually, both Verizon and AT&T offer big discounts for first responders or military. So, but it is listed on there.
They're usually a little bit trickier to deal with as a setup. They're usually, OTR is actually pretty good from a support perspective, but they totally have had major problems in the last few months from a network perspective. So, first of all, none of these virtual carriers build networks, right? And so they're at the mercy at some level of the carriers they're working with. Some are very big companies, and so they can influence, like Google can probably influence their carriers pretty strongly. Visible is owned by Verizon, so it's unlikely they're going to, get screwed by Verizon. But there's never a guarantee here, and we've learned this the hard way, I think, in the last 3 to 6 months, that AT&T has been pulling back quite a bit on a lot of their reselling deals, and a lot of people that have really sweet AT&T deals either no longer have them, or at least you can no longer buy them. And so what we wanted to focus on today are what are the things you can actually buy now. There's not really any point in talking about all the awesome deals that existed 1 year ago, 2 years ago that buy anymore. But all of these are available today if you want it. I personally recommend 2 of these. I've used both of these and they're relatively cheap, so and they work well. And so I can recommend these. This isn't at the expense, and I want to stress that, at the expense of having a, let's call it proper or a kind of network, a little bit like the way Cricket uses AT&T. And you do this prepay every month of $40 to use a visible SIM in a phone. Only certain phones, modern phones, are supported. You can go to, I think it's visible.com is their website. And once they mail you a free SIM, you can pay the $40 and you will get unlimited traffic on your phone. They don't support hotspots. There are workarounds for this that I won't go into on the call, but if you need to know, sorry, they don't support, I got that wrong. They don't support routers. So if you want to know how to use a visible SIM in a router, I'll talk to you about that offline. They do support hotspot, and in fact, they support unlimited hotspot at, I believe it's 5 or 6 megabits per second. And it's prioritized fairly well on the network. So I've used this quite a bit, even at that level. And if you're going to broadcast video to a TV in your RV, this is also a great way to be able to do that on the Verizon network. The reason there's a price range here, 25 to 40, is there's this wacky thing called family pay, group pay, can't remember what it's called, party pay. That is that if you join up with other people and pay as a group, they give you $5 off each time you add a person. So if there's 4 people in your group, you pay $25 a month. The weird thing about this is you don't even need to know the other people in your party pay. You don't exchange any information with them other than the party pay URL. And so there are actually public web pages. There's a page on Reddit that allows you to sign up with other people. And I pay $25 a month for this. And so for $25 a month for this Verizon plan, it's really good. A year and a half ago, we used this as a primary SIM in a phone. Stacy, my wife, used it. And it is not Verizon. And the reason it's not the same as Verizon is it only works, Visible is Verizon, but only on Verizon towers. Verizon, when you buy from Verizon, it will automatically roam wherever Verizon doesn't have a tower. They have roaming agreements all over the country. They roam automatically and it's included in your plan. Visible just won't work. And we figured this out in, I think it was Arley, Alabama. I think it was either Alabama or it was in Kentucky, that a whole area, we're not just talking like one little, spot in the RV park, like multiple counties did not have service with Visible. And so I don't actually recommend it as a primary SIM, but as an additional SIM for Verizon, it will work in 95% of the country. Really good value. Calix Institute is one that a lot of people haven't heard of. I used for a year in my first year of travel a couple of years ago for just Sprint before they had the T-Mobile roaming. And you also had to pay for a year in advance with a router. It was like a $500 investment for a year. But when you break it down, you got a router that was worth about $100. You're actually only paying about $35 a month if you do the annual plan. They do have a quarterly one that gets to about $150 a quarter now. And this will get you unlimited Sprint and roaming to T-Mobile for roughly $50 a month right now. And so this is also, if you're in an area like, again, Thousand Trails, Orlando, and you're looking for a cheap way to get Sprint and T-Mobile, this is a fantastic way to do it. And I won't go into detail on it here, but this is one of the few ways in 2020 to buy a truly unlimited plan that never gets throttled and never gets network prioritized, believe it or not. It goes back to an agreement that Sprint did when they bought a certain spectrum of frequencies, and they have to allow nonprofits to use those frequencies without any interference. And so what you do with Calix Institute is you join Calix Institute, a nonprofit, and you use their internet service to buy this. So you're basically joining a nonprofit as part of this. It's totally straightforward. And so this is actually, when this works, if you're close to a Sprint or T-Mobile tower, you probably won't beat this for performance. I don't use it right now because, to be honest, Verizon and AT&T is good enough for me. But it's a great way to do it if you need it. I do use Google Fi on a bunch of phones. It's not for everybody, but I travel a lot in country and out of country. It's really useful for that. That's the main reason we got this. But I don't really recommend it for data unless you use very, very little. And the other thing I just learned in the last few days is Cricket has this $15 a month deal for a phone that gets you, I believe it's unlimited phone text and 2 gigs of data per month for $15 a month. And I had to mention it here because I'm like, that is a steal, right? You want to, maybe even for one of your kids and they want a phone with some data. I think you're not going to be able to beat that. And I think that's a pretty darn good deal, but it's not unlimited. So be careful about the limit there. And then we could rat hole an OTR probably for another hour. They did do this switch that I already mentioned earlier on the call. I'm not sure there's much value in OTR at this point, selling T-Mobile at the price level they're selling it at. Other people may know better on the call and afterwards, so feel free to chime in on the on the Facebook thread as well. Some people have locked in their AT&T contract before all the shenanigans happened, and they're fine, at least through their contract on AT&T. But most of the unlimited AT&T resellers have basically lost their ability to sell these awesome AT&T deals. So I think now you're back in the same kind of standard boat of, if you want AT&T, you're going to have to buy a standard AT&T plan. I don't know if there's really any way around it at this point. Dustin, do you have anything to add on AT&T and OTR?
One thing that Hope brought up on the chat was all those prices on the Verizon AT&T, those do require auto pay to get those prices. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the routing and account number, but it has to be either a debit card tied to a checking account or the checking account itself. And I did forget to mention that, but both AT&T and Verizon are that way. So thanks for bringing that up, Hope.
AT&T does allow you to do credit card, but Verizon does not. We've talked to them 5 times, and every single rep we've talked to refuses to let me pay with my business credit card. So that's something I recently ran into.
Got it. Well, and the reason they do that is a lot of the credit cards include insurance on the credit card to cover your phone, and they want you to buy their insurance.
All right, last slide, and we'll open it up for some chatting. I will say that all of this information is already out of date as of 11 a.m. this morning, Eastern time. So you just, unfortunately, before you buy anything, don't assume that whatever you heard from us or from other people at the campground is accurate today. You probably, it sounds ridiculous, but I would log into the Fulltime Families members group and do a search for whatever network you're about to buy a plan with. Do a search for that, AT&T, Verizon, etc., and just see, has there been chat in the last few days? Because literally something might have changed. You want to know that. I keep an eye on it really closely. I'll do actually one more slide after this on how to get lots more information, and I'll talk about that. But be aware that changes are happening really fast. The things that you'll hear a lot about is 5G. To be honest, don't get distracted by 5G. It isn't really rolled out very far yet. It is going to be awesome in the long run, particularly for cell reception in urban and suburban areas. For people that are moving around in RVs, it's really probably not going to make much difference to us. And in fact, there's a risk, I don't even say it here, that because all of the 5G traffic is going to pile on a ton of traffic into the cell carriers, it might end up actually being slower for everybody, including 4G users. So this isn't necessarily awesome for us for now. Where the big kind of future is for us, and where it is going to be awesome for us, and I'm pretty sure I will be spending money in this area when it's ready, is low orbit satellite, right? And so OneWeb at Starlink, we're kind of racing to get satellites launched, and we're going to launch low orbit satellite services. OneWeb, unfortunately, just filed for bankruptcy protection a few weeks back. It doesn't look like they're going to be, at least they're not going to be going at the speed they wanted to go at. They may actually disappear completely. But Starlink is the low orbit satellite from SpaceX, which is the Elon Musk marketing machine and company. And so we're hearing a lot about this. It does seem legitimate. They've launched a lot of satellites. They've already tested it they're launching more all through this year. They're promising, believe it or not, a price of $80 a month for Starlink. It will basically be about the same latency as 4G. It'll be, in the 40 to 60 millisecond latency. And this is important for lots of things, for gaming, for good video, really and even for high speeds. So this is good. It's not quite 5G, but for anybody who would be dependent on 4G as an alternative, this is very good. Much higher speeds and capacity will be available. And anywhere we go in the country outside of hiding our RV in a cave, this will work. And so this is actually a game changer for everybody who's an RVer. I actually think we're going to see over the next, say, 5 years, people will be spending longer times in boondocking sites that we just didn't see people at before, because now they can work from there. And so these remote sites that have nobody at them now will have people working there and staying there with Starlink. The big question is it this year or is it next year? Realistically, it will be active this year, but I'm going to guess it's going to roll out in such a limited fashion, it'll be hard for us all to get it, even if we want it. I'm desperately going to try and get it, but I think so will literally tens or hundreds of thousands of other people. This is almost certainly a future recommend option. It might even be the only option to get beyond having a cell phone for yourself. It might be like we're not buying router plans anymore, and this is what we're doing. The good news is if this happens and it's as successful as Elon says it's going to be, it will be a realistic competitor to the cell networks, and the cell plans might actually come down in price. They'll have to compete. And so this is going to be really interesting to watch. Last slide. If you want to, stay updated, and it's really hard to stay updated, and I understand that. I spend a lot of time in it because I'm interested in it, and it makes a difference to my life. The Fulltime Family Members Group usually has the latest information, plus or minus a few days. I've learned probably 80% of what I know from this group called Mobile Internet Resource Center. These guys are full-time RVers that basically built up a website, built up a Facebook group, publish a ton of public information for free. So definitely keep an eye on that. And also for about $85 a year, which sounds like a lot of money, you can become a member and get access to way more information. But the reason I say it sounds like a lot of money is I've paid that for 2 years now, and I've saved way more money than that doing things that they've told me about. And so I have a $20 a month AT&T plan that I got like 2 years ago because of these guys. That is unlimited, right? And I wouldn't have been able to do it without their help. And so I think this is a really valuable group. We're not like, because of the way it works, if a deal comes out and they think there's only 100 of them available, they ask us not to share them outside of memberships. And so we can't run over to Facebook Family Members Group and post every single thing we learn here, or these guys don't have a business. But once it becomes public and they make it public, or it is public like a press release, we do share as soon as we can in Fulltime Family Members. So do be aware that this is kind of like the secret resource you can get access to if you want. But almost all of the information gets shared pretty quickly in the members group too. I know that we ran really close to or at our time limit officially. We started a little bit late, but let's get into the talk and Q&A kind of portion as well. If people have, I can reshare slides if anybody wants to talk about any of the slides, but let's talk about anything else that
Hey, Sean, can you go back to the Verizon AT&T? There's one thing that I forgot to mention.
Ooh. Yep.
I lost it.
Can you see it?
No, I think it went away. But anyways, what I was going to add is on the Verizon one, there's the get more and the do more. So there's a few of those plans. One feature of them, it also gives you half price on another connected device. So that might be like an iPad if you wanted, because sometimes tablets have different data limits than what phone might have, so they don't reduce your priority data. Go back one more, back to the Verizon one. So you'll see, it's hard to read because it's super small, but you'll see like 50% off on connected tablet. Scroll down with your mouse.
Oh yeah, right here.
Right there. So both the do more and the get more plans have that. So you can actually get a jetpack. Again, it's only going to be 15 gigabytes, but for $10 a month. If you add it to, for each line that you have on the get more or do more, you can add a 15 gigabyte jetpack for $10 a month. And I forgot to hit on that, or a tablet. You could add for $10 a month when normally it's $20 a month. So
each one, Dustin, has an additional 15 gigs?
Yeah, so you can add multiple jetpacks. Normally they're $20 a month, and you can add as many as you want. But if you're on the get more or the do more, for each phone that you have on one of those two plans, you get half off. So say you have 4 cell phones and they're all 4 on those plans, you get 4 15 gigabyte jetpacks for $10 a month. So $40 a month would give you 15 times 4, so 60 gigabytes of hotspot data. But you do have to have 4 different jetpacks or 4 different devices that you can put those SIM cards in, or you could switch the SIM cards between one jetpack if you wanted to. So I forgot to mention that, but that is something that some people have done where they're able to get more hotspot data.
Right.
So now we can go back to the talk. I just forgot to
Yeah.
highlight that.
So anybody got any comments or questions? Happy to discuss any of the topics or any tips that they have that we missed out on for what you've done to make things better.
One other thing that came up in the chat, Hope had asked or had stated that the Cricket is owned by AT&T, and they are.
I didn't know
another
that.
one, Metro PCS is also owned by T-Mobile, so they're also one.
Yeah, so that means that I think in that case, those options are obviously much safer than. I mean, what we've really learned with OTR and many of the AT&T resellers is they don't have any real deep leverage with AT&T, and you know, unfortunately, we all use internet a lot from those folks, and if it just probably got to the point, I assume, where they just weren't profitable for AT&T because we're using way too much traffic, and so you know they can cancel them. That can't happen with presumably with the parent, you know, the companies that are owning the virtual network providers. And there's a legal detail with Calix Institute that they believe they have, and it's worked out for years, that there's no legal way that Sprint and now T-Mobile can get out of that unlimited contract. They're stuck there for another 4 years, I think.
It also helps with the congestion too. So if a company owns them, then the network congestion, I guess the pecking order always goes, the first one to get congested is the ones that are third party or resellers. So for example, like the Straight Talks, like the Walmart or Net10, like a lot of those prepaid third-party vendors, they're going to be the first to be slowed down when you're in like TTO situation. And then it's going to go to the people that are on their own prepaid. So like Cricket, or if you're on Verizon prepaid, they're going to be the next ones. Then the people that are over their priority data on their phone. So like with that one plan, the 75 gigabytes, when you're over that, they're going to be the next. And then your priority data is going to be last to be congested. So if your priority data is being congested, that means everyone is, because they kind of do it in that pecking order. We just had another question come in out of the plans for Verizon that you showed, which is the new Verizon plan unlimited. Again, they all say unlimited. So they are all unlimited. It's just at the fastest speed. So the one that I think you might be referring to would be the Get More. That's the one that has the most. It's 75 gigabytes on your phone that you can use at full speeds, and it will stay full speed as long as you're in an area that's not congested. And then it is truly unlimited, but they could slow you down after 75 gigabytes. That one also has 30 gigabytes of hotspot. And when you use the hotspot data, the 30 gigabytes, that's going to be full speed as fast as they can give you. But once you're over that 30 gigabytes, whether it's congested or not, they're going to slow you way down when you run out of hotspot, and it brings you down to 3G speeds, which is pretty much unusable. It's like 600 kilobytes a second. You can't do much at all. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were looking for, but Elaine had asked that.
Yeah. So I was just looking at mine online to see which one. I know I had an unlimited one, but I didn't know which one it was. So mine is it. That's what it's. That what I wrote, the new Verizon, whatever it was. That's exactly how it's written when I look up and see what plan I'm on. That's what it says, and it says 2017. I've had this account since 2005. So, I guess when they changed everything over there was a time when they changed everything over, and when you upgraded your phone, they automatically switched you into things. So it says that I have 4G LTE only for data. After 22 gigabytes a line per month, they may throttle you. And mobile hotspots, they say you get 15 gigabytes, and then they throttle you. So I'm not sure where.
So you're on the older plans, and honestly, the 2017 plans to the current ones, most likely you're going to get more data, and at least that 15 gigabytes of hotspot. If you do auto pay, you can probably get more data for the same price or less, because the plans keep getting better and better with the carriers, kind of like what Sean was talking about as a competition with like Starlink's getting closer and closer, and the other carriers. T-Mobile is probably the driving force of it. They're getting more and more competitive. So most likely you could probably, for the same price, like if you contacted Verizon, you could probably save money or get a better deal. And it's worth a phone call to Verizon to figure out, because you're on an old plan. I remember the 22 gigabyte plans and then you just have the 15 gigabytes of hotspot. So it might be worth contacting them to find out.
Yeah, it used to be the case, I think, that it used to be the case that you have to be really careful on upgrading plans, because you could lose like crazy awesome deals. Like particularly the super old grandfathered unlimited stuff from 10-ish years ago. But these days, I think it's changed a little bit, where the unlimited plans to Dustin's point, of like 3, 4, 5 years ago, they're often better now, and you actually do want to do an upgrade. Be aware that if you do an upgrade, you're probably recontracting for a year or two. But if you're already there and you're already going to use it for a year or two anyway, I think you should be aware of maybe what you're going to lose, if anything, but you're probably going to gain. And so always worth a look. And Dustin, can you help people offline if they need to evaluate a plan like that? What do you recommend their approach is on something like that?
So one of my other businesses is I own some Verizon cell phone stores. So it is something that we can certainly help with. We do have to remotely log in and access your account. And typically I'll just have my district manager of my stores. If you contact me, I can put you in contact with him, and he can certainly help you look at it too. But because I don't do that stuff on a regular basis, I don't know how to change your plans. I always refer you to him. So if you're not in a hurry to do it, I can usually set that up. It makes no difference to me whether you use me. We're certainly willing to help. But you can also call Verizon or go into a local Verizon store. They should be able to do the same thing as well. The one difference is my district manager is very familiar with RVing because I do it all the time. So sometimes he'll understand your situation more than the 1-800 number will. But yeah, that is something that we can help you out with if you do want to reach out to me directly offline. We did have another question come in on the chat as well. Michelle had asked about the WeBoost. She does work teaching VIP kids, so wants to make sure she has her best signal. Hope had responded and suggested maybe the MIMO, the 4x4 antenna. And honestly, it really depends. To say one cell booster is better than the other, I would agree that the MIMO antenna that Sean showed, the little tiny one, that's probably going to be your best upfront investment because it's a lot cheaper than some of the other ones. So that might be a good spot to check. I would say the one that's going to give you the most options and the most range, but is also almost $700, was that RV65 WeBoost, because it comes with a big telescoping pole and a 65 dB antenna. But that one's also $650, $700. So I would agree with Sean. The best place to start is just that $20 to $40 MIMO antenna, assuming your device has the ports for that.
Yeah, and I think in many cases, it is going to matter how, do you think you will get a return on your investment, right? If you're going to be, fired from your job if you don't have good internet connection for a few days and you are in remote areas, I would buy a WeBoost up front, right? And because it will pay for itself in that sense. If it's just a matter of optimizing, Netflix watching, then I think you probably don't want to do it because you can just avoid it, or just don't watch Netflix the week or two you're somewhere remote. And then the problem is, for most of us, is we're in between. There's value. Is it that much value? And it's a lot of money to put down on something. Definitely start with a MIMO antenna. And if you have a router that doesn't have MIMO ports and you're on Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile, I would consider getting a router with MIMO ports and the MIMO antenna and move your SIM if you from whatever router you have, because you can buy any of those routers that I showed that connect to the MIMO antenna. You can get them kind of certified new or even used on like eBay for like $100. So you're talking about $140, $150 up front for a setup that is probably better. In many cases, it will work even better than the booster and certainly way easier to use and set up. And the other thing that's really important about it is it's portable. And so as somebody who sometimes needs to work, I wanted to work from my truck away from the RV, being able to take the router and that MIMO antenna with me and having the internet anywhere I go is really valuable as well. You can't realistically take the boosters with you somewhere. And so I think there's huge value in the router plus MIMO setup.
When you say router, Sean, are you referring to like the little sort of jetpack MiFi kind of things?
Yep. Yeah, anything that's basically not a phone, not a tablet, where you stick the SIM in and get data only. They're all basically cell routers. They have cell on one side and kind of Wi-Fi to your RV on the other side. Any of those devices. And so often if you bought a router plan, they'll give you a router. But you don't. If you have a Verizon plan or an AT&T plan, you often don't need to buy the router from AT&T or Verizon directly. But very important, you do, if you want a router to work on Verizon, you need to buy a Verizon compatible router. It's different frequencies. They actually they will check as part of the network, communication. Is this device allowed work on my network? And if the device is not allowed work on their network, because it will not work. I've actually made that mistake and bought a router that would, from a technical perspective, would work in their network, but it wasn't correctly certified and it just wouldn't work. But if you're I've never had a problem buying on eBay the used or new routers that say it's AT&T, say it's Verizon. I get it. It's always worked fine for me. It's not without risk, but it's pretty low risk to do that.
Hey, Sean, can you hear me? I have a question for you.
Yep.
You mentioned that you had an AT&T plan that was like $20 a month, unlimited. We recently bought a plan, and I honestly don't remember who we bought it through. My wife has that information. I don't have access to her right now. But the company just shut down, and we already paid this month, so it's still working. From your experience or other people's experience, do these plans continue to work? And is there a service provider, or do they eventually just cut off?
I think the way we would have answered that question 3 months ago would have been, oh, you should be fine and you're in contract and it'll go forever. What we've seen in the last few months, and Dustin, I think you can add here too, is that specifically the resold AT&T contracts, I think somebody at AT&T probably realized that for like 1% of their revenue, it's 20% of their traffic. And they're like, this doesn't make sense for us. Let's get out of this business. And unfortunately, all these companies that were, honest companies, small businesses where people were running them, they've kind of all gotten, I don't want to say they've gotten screwed by AT&T, because they probably had, it was probably a legal agreement that, is fine. But AT&T is just not doing this anymore. And so I think what's happening, based on observation, not based on any knowledge that I have internally, that you're going to find all these plans are going to stop working, or almost all of them. In some cases, I know of one person who prepaid, I think, for a year on AT&T with OTR, and that went through to AT&T the way the prepaid works. They're actually going to be able to stay on AT&T for a year, but at the end of that year, they're in the same boat as everybody else. That was unusual. Most people were prepaying month by month, and it's all going to end. And I don't think there is any magic where you're going to get out of it. I don't know of any. Dustin, do you know anything more?
No, essentially what they're doing is they're in my opinion is they're watching traffic. So as long as you're using a reasonable amount of traffic, they might let you keep going. But if they deem you using too much traffic than what you're paying for, then that's when they're going to say, hey, you're violating the terms of the conditions, and then they can shut you off. So there's not a set answer, yes or no, they're going to shut you off. You'll find out when it stops working if they're shutting you off. Until then, I would just keep using it how you've always used it.
Yeah, and I might recommend, there's a decent chance you're going to get cut off. And so depending on how important it is for you to have kind of unlimited data available to you or high amounts of data available to you, it's probably time to start pulling a trigger on a plan B, getting ready for that. Otherwise, you're going to have like this week period where you're going to be like, I don't have any internet, right? And so, and again, lots of the options you just saw are all available. And you just need to decide which network do you want to be on, and maybe try and pull the trigger on one of the cheaper ones.
Yeah, we already have Verizon. The new AT&T was our second option, so we're pretty good. But thank you.
Sure.
And another question came in about SkyRoam. If we've heard of them. I personally do not know who SkyRoam is. I don't know. Is that Jeff Bezos' low orbit? I don't know what SkyRoam is.
I'm looking it up now. It sounds familiar, but I don't remember. The best Wi-Fi for travelers. I'm trying to evaluate it real quick here.
Yeah, I just have my iPad and my phone, so I don't have another screen.
So SkyRoam looks like it is a virtual carrier kind of all over the world. I think they're one of these. I think it's a little bit like the way Google Fi has kind of negotiated contracts all over the world. Just from the very quick, search I've just done, it seems like a very legitimate provider. But I'm going to guess, without looking into it, it's not going to give you the kind of unlimited data that many of the plans we've talked about. There is no magic in these resellers negotiating things in the United States in particular. Other countries in the world actually generally have cheaper cell data than we do in the US. And so what might be brilliant in the rest of the world may not be as good here. I doubt you're going to get a better US deal from somebody like a SkyRoam. I'd be surprised. Otherwise, we'd hear about it more.
So it's a well, I think it's marketed for like world travelers. It's like a MiFi device, and you have to subscribe, either pay as you go, like one day at a time, or monthly. But there's no contracts, and it's unlimited data. So I was just wondering, like, if you guys had heard of it, and if you thought like it was like an option for, like, it seems like it's expensive to go get into like Wi-Fi or that kind of thing, and they if you only need it like 4 or 5 times a year, it seems like this would be maybe a good solution.
Sure. I mean, when I mentioned Google Fi earlier, and we didn't really talk about it very much, Google Fi does the exact same thing here, where it negotiated contracts all over the world. You'll get cell services, calls and texts and data anywhere in the world. I doubt SkyRoam is cheaper per gig anywhere in the world than Google, just because of their negotiation power. But it isn't really, none of these, Google, Fi, SkyRoam, I don't think any of them are good answers for high amounts of data in the US. There is no magic. Anybody who's buying data from a T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T has to pay them some reselling rate. And so I look into it and chime back into the Facebook group afterwards. But, I'm going to guess that they're not even as good as Google Fi for international travel. And none of the international kind of plans like that are good if you just want to focus inside of one country, whatever the country is. If you're going to be stationary in one country, you want to get a plan that's for that country. It's always cheaper. So whenever I travel elsewhere in the world, I'll use Google Fi for the first day or two while I'm there, until I get a local SIM, and then I'll use the local SIM for the data from that point on. It's rarely the answer.
That's what I do when I travel international too, is I'll buy a SIM card where I'm at. We did have another question come in about Wi-Fi Ranger and tools for strengthening Wi-Fi. We didn't cover too much about that, but I do know a lot of people that use them. So Wi-Fi Ranger is essentially like a Weeboo cell phone, but for Wi-Fi. It usually will extend the range where you can grab a Wi-Fi. So I'll go back to Pio Pico, where we were at. So they do have one little family lodge area there where the Wi-Fi, when it works okay. Like you can connect to it, but it's far away from all of the other campers. So the reason the Wi-Fi usually doesn't work very good isn't because campgrounds just get bad internet. The reason it doesn't work is because everyone's connected to the Wi-Fi and they're drowning. It's essentially a congested network. So that's why it's not working, is now you have 200 to 500 people or whatever all trying to stream Netflix on the same internet pipe. So sometimes the Wi-Fi Ranger or devices like that, if you can connect over to a Wi-Fi that's not near the campground, so not as many people are on it, sometimes there's some advantages to doing that. And they have Wi-Fi Rangers or devices similar to it that can even go like a quarter mile away and grab a Wi-Fi. They're very popular on boats. So if you're out on a boat, you can grab the restaurant that's offshore. So a lot of boats have them. So, and you can put those on RVs and be able to strengthen Wi-Fi connection and connect to an area that might not have as many users on it. And that's where that could come into handy or come into use, where if you're just using a Wi-Fi Ranger to connect to the same Wi-Fi that everyone else is already on, it's not going to do you any good, because the reason it's not working is because there's too many people on it. I don't know what your thoughts are, Sean, but that's kind of my take on it.
One of the things, I'm glad you actually said that. When we stayed at Clearbrook, outside of Thousand Trails Orlando, we moved to Clearbrook, and the RV next to us had a hardwired Comcast. There were long-timers there, and so they had a Comcast connection. One of the things that happens with the cable providers and also with fiber providers is, in many cases, if you have a contract, or quite frankly, if anybody in your extended family has a contract with Verizon or Xfinity Comcast, they let you log into public Wi-Fi hotspots anywhere in the country and use them for free. So my father-in-law has a Comcast contract in Florida. I use his login to log into Comcast Wi-Fi hotspots anywhere in the country. And sometimes what you can do at a campground is, if you can be within range, is you can connect to, and it's not just Comcast. Comcast partners with all of the other cable providers in the country, and they send out this network that you'll see sometimes called cable Wi-Fi. They all send it out. I can connect to any cable Wi-Fi network anywhere in the country, even if it's not Comcast, log in with my Comcast credential or my father-in-law's, and get crazy fast internet. So while I say campground internet is never any good, it's because they're giving it out to everybody. If you can snag into a restaurant's network, that not everybody else can, or even better, one of these kind of Comcast or Verizon hotspot networks, you will get awesome internet. And that's probably, I don't have a Wi-Fi booster, but that would be a great use case for a Wi-Fi booster where you could tap into, like, probably true even in Thousand Trails Orlando, with all of those houses around, a bunch of those houses have to have Comcast routers and Verizon routers, one or the other. Every Comcast and Verizon router by default sends out a public part on the network. You don't even do anything as a customer. It doesn't interfere with your traffic. That would be a great way to get really fast internet. And so that's probably a really good reason to get a Wi-Fi booster.
We are at a campground right now, and we did just that. We ran out of our 30 gigs of hotspot. And we have 2 kids that do a lot of online gaming. My husband works full time, and we lost like 15 gigs in a week, and we were like, holy smokes. So we're in a sort of a weird use case where they actually don't broadcast the Wi-Fi out to the entire campground. So in order to pick it up, you have to be within about 500 feet of the office. So when we got an $80 Wi-Fi Ranger internal router, we were able to pick up on it, and we're like one of like 4 people on it.
That's awesome.
And then when it's a little spotty still. And then when my daughter had a birthday party, we saw this Xfinity Wi-Fi on the router, scan. We paid $20 and got unlimited, like, household level, like, pay per use Wi-Fi for a week, and we were like, oh, it's like being home again.
Oh yeah, it's
So
awesome.
it really does work, and they have pay-per-use also. So I feel like our little investment, while it may not be something we can use very often for $80, it's pretty cool.
Oh, I didn't know they had pay-per-use. That's awesome.
And if you have, so Comcast also does wireless. They're a reseller for wireless, and in their areas, they actually, that's why they started putting those modems in customers' houses where they're split, where they have a public and then their own. Is if like Philadelphia is one of the best places in the world to go to for good internet everywhere, because everyone in Philadelphia has Comcast. That's their headquarters. So it might be beneficial to maybe I should look into that, but get a Comcast cellular line through them, because then it would only make sense if you spend a lot of time in more urban areas or suburban areas.
I think to buy
where they have
the Xfinity
Comcast.
Mobile, Dustin, you need to have you can't
Xfinity
buy it
account.
independent. You need to have Xfinity first, and then you can buy it. My in-laws, actually, their mobile is Xfinity Mobile, and so I looked into being like, oh, can I get this? Because it's a great plan, but you need the base Xfinity first. So you need a house somewhere first.
Yeah. So and that's why it does that, is it works off all of the modems that are in everyone's houses already. So Minneapolis, where I'm from, it's a huge Comcast market too. So it's a pretty hot spot on the Comcast world. So I didn't know they had the pay-per-use either. So that's an awesome option too.
Yeah. Oh, the major downside when we used the Comcast at Clarebrook was that we were so sad at the next week when we didn't have it anymore, because you just remember how good internet can be, and then you're like, oh, we're back to cell networks.
Well, and if you camp in more urban areas, you could probably get that more often too.
Yeah, true.
We don't usually do that, but if you do, that's an option.
Downside of a big rig.
Yeah. Any other questions, or we can wrap up?
Very cool. If there are more questions, or if anybody's watching this video afterwards and you have questions, just follow up with the questions in the Full-Time Families members group. There's a post on this topic, and then we can go back and forth within the group that way.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean.
Cool. Thanks, Dustin. Thanks, Stephanie. Bye, everybody.
Bye.